Yes. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me, Shoaib?
Hello,
Hello?
am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you loud and
Okay.
clear.
Okay, good. So let me see. So this is the tricky thing. Are you also on a phone or a laptop?
I'm on laptop.
Oh, okay. Now this is the tricky thing that how do I make you the co-host? What's happening? Oh, yes. ये तो okay. मैं host make co-host. Okay. So now see if you're able to, because on the phone not all the settings are available. Join, letting people join. अभी तो वो admit, each one you have to admit. I don't know if it gives you the option
I think it
that
will give me that option to allow people.
I have to give that to you.
No, no, I think now you have made me co-host now, so I would be able to let them in.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I don't know. I don't know for sure because एक बार कुछ नहीं हो पा रहा था and I don't know what the reason was. I
Can
can't
you just
remember.
put your phone on landscape mode so it would be easier to see your
Yes,
face?
yes, yes. Yeah, yeah.
No, 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 no. It's like actually
Worse?
portrait is better than yes, it's worst. Portrait is better, but a slightly upper, yeah, slightly up. Yes, now it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
This is better.
okay. Yeah, this is the thing
This
that
is
let me,
this is better.
you have to, now I can see myself. Oh, I had
Mm,
switched to the other screen, so I couldn't see myself.
yes.
So now I know. Okay, मैं
Now it's
कैसी दिख
better.
रही हूँ.
This is the best thing.
Yeah. But you know, phone pay, this is the other thing. Why is my मुझे इतना loud नहीं सुनाई इतना अच्छा नहीं दे रहा है. But I don't know what to do about it.
Okay. Just give me a second now. Just give me.
Hmm.
Yes. Sorry, I'm back.
हाँ हाँ. Okay, I think now it's better because I changed मेरा sound का कुछ ठीक है setting. I think अब better है. So yeah, admit. I hope you know there's a setting that you can change, but that's like I have to log in into. Um, yeah, I have to log into the account, and then you have to kind of change that setting. Let's see. I hope you can admit. We can.
Yes, I think now I would be able to.
Yeah, no, but there's also a way to just like change that setting and so that it allows everyone to just like join. But we don't want to do it before the speakers because एक बार ऐसा हो गया था. So once the speakers are ready and we are ready, then it's better to just like allow everyone to join instead of having to admit each and everyone one by one. But like experiment with that. Uh, कि कुछ गड़बड़
Not
हो
an issue.
जाए.
I will allow individually. Let's go with
ठीक
that.
है. Okay. Okay. Then one more thing is to check. So at some point I will like let uh, वही Syed Harun is in the waiting room.
Yeah, yes,
Right?
yes, let me.
You can see that?
Yes, yes, I can.
But wait, no,
Like
we
I
don't
can
want to
admit
admit.
him, but right now let's wait till the speakers are here.
Yeah, exactly. And I already switched on the recording, but ठीक है ये edit बाद में करना पड़ेगा all this like nonsense that we're I mean, abhi we haven't started the
Yes, yes.
webinar, but I don't want to forget, and so ye abhi se kar diya. The other thing is chat. So at some point, I'll like remind people that they can ask questions and they can post on chat, but I'll also open it up ke हाथ raise करके भी question पूछ सकते हैं. So chat, I should also be able to see, but I'm trying to think how we should do that. So at least like if you
You
can
can
keep a
see
chat.
there's a option chat option just
I
next to the
know,
participants.
right. That I know,
हाँ,
but इसमें phone पे थोड़ा I think next screen पे जाना पड़ता है. So
phone pay.
uh,
Okay.
yeah, which is I'll have to keep doing that, and so if you can just keep a check on the chats, on the questions if they are coming up, and maybe like if I don't look at them for a while, then you can kind of like say, there's a question, and you can, ask
Or
that
I would just
question.
remind you on WhatsApp, anything.
Yeah, but again, WhatsApp का भी ये है कि I
Anjali is
don't.
there.
Okay, yeah, can let her.
I'm
So
allowing her.
WhatsApp का भी ये है कि I don't want to like if I can see it and it goes away, it's
But if
fine.
you no, if you just start the click on the chat option, the
Mm.
even if there's the next window opening, that's not an issue. You can still hear all the things.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying if I forget,
Okay, I will remind
uh,
you.
then just or just say that there was this like you can speak and say this is
Okay.
a question, so that we don't miss it.
So I'm allowing Anjali. Okay, Anjali.
Yeah, allow.
Hello, Anjali. Am I audible? Can you just please unmute yourself so that
Me?
no,
Oh,
no,
yeah, sorry.
Anjali.
Anjali.
You can just unmute
Hi,
yourself
Anjali.
and let us know that the voice is clear or not. I
Yeah, hi, Anjali.
yes,
Can
maybe.
you unmute yourself? Hmm.
Hi, I can hear you. Just give me a minute.
Yeah,
Yes, okay, sure.
Hi, Karthik.
Hello, is my voice audible?
Yeah. Hmm.
Hi, is there any disturbance around me or anything in terms of sound?
There is a little bit. So when you're speaking, there's a little bit of echo, but it fades away. I don't know. Is anyone else hearing that?
1 second, I'll just put on
No, to
earphone.
me, it's loud and clear. There's anything.
Acha, actually, now it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Is this better?
It's better again.
Okay.
So I do hope people do attend, join. Let's see how many do. So is my voice clear?
Yeah.
So usually we wait for like at least 10 people to join before starting. Let's see. I hope more people join, but yeah, this time it's such a short notice so that I don't know how many will join. So I guess we are ready, right? Maybe Shoaib,
Yes,
maybe we can start allowing people to join.
people are already here. They have joined.
Okay, okay. Okay, let's hello, everyone who's joined. Welcome to this webinar, and let's just wait maybe 4 or 5 minutes more to allow more people to join before we start. But I just want to let you know a little about the organization. I'll let Anjali and Karthik talk about their organization, Yugma, but the host Foundation for Equal Citizenship, if you're not familiar with, it's a small organization that works mostly with youth. Our focus is on education. We have our center in Trilokpuri, a slum in East Delhi. We have a children's education center, and we are also working on other projects such as income generation post-COVID for the low-income daily wages. We're also working with women in the community, specifically on health and nutrition, but we plan to expand into other areas on women's empowerment, whether it's financial security or just more education, etc. We also started a series, webinar series in October or November of last year, with the first one being on different topics, themes on women, mostly young women, and covering topics like women in workspaces, political movements, social movements, technology. So one of the objective is to showcase youth, what they are doing, and make it something that's inspiring for other youth, to also kind of, become part of some of the movements that they are in, or think, oh, this is an area that I'd never thought of becoming part of, and it's, opens new avenues. And of course, FFEC would very much like people to join FFEC in whichever way they would like to, whether it's internships we offer off and on through the year, and of course volunteers. We're always looking for volunteers. So those are some of the objectives of doing these webinars. And so we're having our second webinar starting today, which is on climate change, a topic that is really, you can see, worldwide, it's the youth that is really more involved in this because it directly impacts them and future generations. And that's, I mean, one of the amazing things that, very young people have kind of made everyone else also to sit up and acknowledge that there is a problem, because till some years ago, a lot of people were in denial about it. And so around that, we have very young speakers with us today for our first one, which is more like an introduction to climate change and how it's impacting India. And we're going to discuss a few, themes around that. We are going to have two more, so it's a three-part series. The second one is going to be more on some of the causes and history of that, as well as policies and some of the actions or, movements around environment that India has seen over a long period of time, and how, when you look at it today, it wasn't called climate change back like 20 years ago, but how some of that relates to some of, what we see today, some of the environmental movements related to, destruction of the environment or whatever, the debate of, sorry, I just, I would request everyone to be on mute if, it's okay, just so that we don't, get other voices. Yeah. So the second one is more giving a historical perspective and some of the movements around environment. And then the final one, we really want to see what are some of the, solutions available. What is the future ahead, and what are some of the solutions available for a better future? And what are some of the, current campaigns, organizations that are working on these things, and how others can join them or become part of the movement, and also what are some of the local actions that may be relevant to people living, say, in Delhi versus say Chennai. What is something that somebody can get involved with that really, not only impacts them, but also like, yeah, I'm part of a solution. So we want to kind of end the series on that note, that we see how in the future we can become part of other campaigns, and people who've not been involved so far can join, and also just learning more about it. With that, I would like the speakers of today, both are part of an organization called Yugma, Anjali and Karthik, and I would let them introduce themselves. Before that, I think I didn't let people know who I am. So I'm Yasmin Fatma, the founder of a Foundation for Equal Citizenship. And let's start with your introduction, Anjali.
Sure. So, hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It would be great to see some of your faces if you'd like to turn on your camera. But my name is Anjali. I'm an undergraduate student right now at Ashoka University. So I'm studying sociology and environmental studies. Along with this, I'm one of the co-founders of the Yugma network. So it's a network in which we're both working internally and externally. So internally, we're sort of running an experiment on what would a democratic organization look like in a youth organization. So we've been working on that, and externally we work mainly on environmental policies, and we do this through language, so multiple languages in India. We do through education, through policy work, discussions, artwork, many different avenues. And along with this, I work as a researcher at Land Conflict Watch and other initiatives that I'm involved in. I will hand it over to Karthik to introduce himself, and if he wants to add anything to Yugma Network's introduction.
Hello, guys. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
I think as far as Yugma's introduction is concerned, Anjali covered pretty much of what we are doing and what we are trying to create. Around our work is always around circled around environmental justice and social justice. And I am based out from Tamil Nadu, and I do organic farming, and yeah, that is my background. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anjali, Karthik. So obviously everybody's heard of climate change, but not everyone understands what that really means and how real is it? I mean, climate has been changing ever since, we know of the existence of Earth. But what does it really mean? We know that it's impacting everyday lives of many people. If one of you could explain a little more about the change in weather patterns that seem quite obvious now, and also how it's impacting people's lives. Maybe like we can start with a little about that, and then move forward.
Sure. I'll go ahead with this. So to begin with, I really hope that all of you know what climate change is. But if you don't know, I'll just very briefly explain it. So there are emissions of certain gases like carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, along with many other gases that come out from a variety of different activities, whether it's meat industry, so all of the emissions from that, or whether it's from burning fossil fuels. And these go into the atmosphere and they create basically a very thick layer of these gases in our atmosphere. And because of that, heat that comes in from the sun gets trapped within the Earth's atmosphere, and this slowly increases the temperature of the Earth. This is a very simple understanding of what climate change is for anyone who's not aware of it. In terms of how it's been impacting us, very often we think about, okay, climate change, it's a buzzword. Does it really happen? Is it really happening? Is there any point to things like the COP26 or these kind of reports that keep coming out, or movies that keep coming out on it? They seem really distant. They seem really like, it just seems fictional, right? Like not really, we don't see the impact of it. But that's actually not true. So climate change is something that's definitely a longer process. And climate change has always been happening on Earth. Definitely. It's happened since the start. The Earth's climate has changed. But what has happened recently in the past few decades is that human activity has accelerated this change of climate massively. And we don't have, humans as a species cannot evolve so fast to adapt to it. And it's not just about humans. Generally, the Earth's ecosystem cannot adapt so fast or evolve so fast to adapt to such rapid climate changes. So how does it show around us? Well, I think I think many of you are from Delhi and even from other parts of India. You might have noticed in the past year or two, while we've been sitting at home during the pandemic, there's been a lot more heat waves. Your houses have been a lot warmer. Right now, I am based in Delhi right now. And in the middle of winter, we had a week of heavy rains at a time when it never rains. We've had 3 to 4 major cyclones. So actually the west coast of India doesn't really get cyclones because the ocean there aren't many cyclones that come in that region. It's usually the east coast of India that has more of cyclones. But in the past year or two, we've had 2 cyclones in the west coast of India. And a lot of this is because of changing weather patterns. So weather patterns and temperatures are what cause cyclones to occur. So we've seen a lot of cyclones, a lot of flooding in many different cities of India. You must have seen the news about this. So in terms of just weather, if you just think back to the past 1 to 2 years while you've been at home, there have been a lot of changes. Of course, then there's also like climate change itself. You can also see it in terms of pollution. So if you live in Delhi especially, but pollution is not just in Delhi, it's happening in most major cities in India. You must have noticed the increase in AQI and the increase in pollution in most of these major cities. So that is a direct indicator of climate change, because those are the number of, these kind of toxic gases that we're releasing into the air. But what kind of impact does this really have? Does it really impact our lives? Is it just, if it's just temperature, can we control it somehow? It's really important to understand that climate change is not just something that's going to impact the environment, but it's actually going to impact our economy, is going to impact our food, our health, our jobs, our entire basically society that we've built as humans. It's going to be impacting that very directly. And we're going to delve into it a little bit more in this webinar today, but I'm just going to start off by saying two things I'm going to start off by just addressing healthcare, since we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. So definitely with the increase of climate change, that means temperatures will rise. And so we're going to have increasing droughts. So access to water is going to become very difficult in many parts of not just India, but across the world, especially in drought-prone regions of India. So that is definitely one thing. Other thing is, with the increase of flooding, on the other hand, flooding actually causes dirty water to mix with clean water. And so we'll see the contamination of many water sources in the country, which is going to make access to clean water a lot more difficult in places that are already suffering from access to water. Additionally, we're going to see a rise of diseases like diarrhea, malaria, dengue, mostly because one, they're connected to clean water and access to water in general. And two, they're also connected to things like insects like mosquitoes, which are going to increase if we have more dirty water and more stagnant water, which will happen as climate change increases. So we're currently seeing a pandemic. There may be many more of them if temperatures change very drastically. Of course, air pollution, water pollution, we already know the impact of that. And since I live in Delhi, I can't walk out without my lungs burning right now. So we don't even forget long-term effects. All of us feel the short-term effect of things like air pollution and water pollution. We'll also have things like heat-related health issues, especially in urban areas. So it can cause many things like migraines and many other such impacts of heat itself, especially because all of us, we live in such concrete houses, right? So our concrete houses actually trap heat even more rather than releasing heat. So what happens is that, especially in big cities, as climate change increases, our cities are going to heat up. Concrete heats up really fast. You must have noticed, right? If you walk bare feet on concrete, it heats up really fast. So as climate change increases, our cities are going to increasingly heat up. And that's going to have many negative impacts, both on humans in terms of health, as well as access to resources. So that is something very, very severe to keep in mind. We don't have the healthcare facilities right now to be able to deal with this. And this is not just going to impact like our own bodies, but it is obviously going to have an impact on the economy as well, because the more people that fall sick, the less access we have to natural resources and healthcare facilities, the more jobs will be lost, the less people will be able to work. And that is a direct link over there. The other thing I thought I would just mention before we delve into something in more depth is I'm sure all of you know that recently we had the COP26, right? The COP26, the Conference of the Parties. It's basically where world leaders from most countries meet together and they address climate change and they address what is the progress and what are future goals. So this year, in 2021, we had the COP26, and there were a couple of things that came out of it. There's a lot of debate on whether it went well or not, but most people agree that COP26 did not go very well. So the reasons for this are, one, So India committed to becoming net zero, that means having a zero carbon emission by 2070. Unfortunately, 2070 is just too late, because by 2070, we're already going to have crossed the limit after which we cannot reverse climate change. We still actually, it's debatable whether we can still reverse climate change, but by 2070, it's just way too late. Additionally, so India did not join either. There were two coalitions that were made. One was to stop the usage of coal, and the other coalition was to stop deforestation. India didn't join either of these, so it's not signed either of them, and it has refused to join. So that is a big statement. That means we're not going to be addressing deforestation or the shift to renewable energies as seriously as we should be. And two more interesting points is one, the largest group of people at COP26 were from fossil fuel lobbies. And they were the ones who were pushing for climate financing. So they wanted to use the profits that come out of fossil fuels to finance climate related development in developing countries. And if you can think about how messed up that kind of is, it's basically taking the profits out of coal, oil, and all of that, and using them to say that, okay, we're going to help increase climate resilience in developing countries. And that's really not solving much. Essentially, that's using money still coming out of something that's causing climate change and disguising it as something that's helping to tackle climate change. So that is kind of an overview of COP26. I think later on, I'll talk more in depth about climate change and livelihoods, especially in the context of India. But yeah, back to you, Yasmin.
Yeah, thanks, Anjali. That gives a really, a good overview and how it's really impacting, people's lives even now. I'd like to talk more about also the inequality of it and why it also becomes a social justice issue. Some call it climate justice also. But before that, let's hear from Karthik. Karthik is doing, farming and food and agriculture, as Anjali mentioned, is going to be impacted severely. It already is. And beyond India, there are countries where generally we're seeing more of migration of people, around the world. It has increased significantly, partly because of wars, but also because of some areas becoming too dry and agriculture no longer being a source of livelihood for people. And it's expected to actually just keep, making the whole, migration even more, common. And that is going to impact all countries as well. I mean, you can see some of the impact, in terms of government policies, whether it's in India, whether it's in Europe. And imagine if we don't do anything about climate change, what it's going to do in the future. But before going into the inequality of it all, let's, Karthik, if you can talk a little more about how food and agriculture is going to be impacted and how policy can have an influence or has not had, an influence so far in, all this.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. Basically, as far as agriculture is concerned, India's agriculture, more than 50% of India's agriculture is rain-fed agriculture, which means the agriculture will be happening depending upon the rainfall. So this amounts for 40% of India's food supply. So India's 40% of food supply basically depends upon rain. But what happens due to this climate change is that rains become highly unpredictable. So when rain becomes unpredictable, the farmers who depend upon the rain lose their livelihood. So this is a current situation of farmers. When the farmers get affected, the food production also gets affected. So if this climate change is going to be, as far as the current practical situation is concerned, what we see is that after Paris Agreement COP26, nothing is happening on ground or at the policy level. So this situation is going to become worse. Worse in the sense, like we are in the crisis of losing our food production due to this climate change. Also, like agriculture sector is already in a crisis, because like many people might have heard about this farmer suicide that is happening. So which is due to, which is like collective failure of policies that happened in the past, that is already there, which is not rectified. This for agrarian crisis, this climate change has fueled this whole agrarian crisis that is happening now. So farmers are getting affected because of unpredicted rainfall. Because like when farmer sows a seed, so he calculates when will be the rain. For example, monsoon will be predicted. So as far as India is concerned, southwest monsoon is like that will happen for around August, September, October, like 3 months that will be there. So farmer will be calculating the amount of rainfall that will be received during the monsoon, and he will be planting the seeds. But what is happening in the past 2 years is that rainfall could not be predicted by the farmer, which means that the places which have never received rainfall has received much more amount of rainfall than expected, which has led to the crops being destroyed. On the other hand, there are heat waves across the countries where rainfall used to be flowing much. So in that case, also farmer loses their livelihood. So what is the point we need to understand is that climate crisis is an agrarian crisis. Climate crisis is a food crisis, which is a production crisis, and we are in the mid. We need to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, around livelihoods, another, I think, area that's impacted, and you guys know more than me, is fishing, right? I mean, already, a lot of the waters are polluted, but one of the issues with climate change is also rising sea levels. And the coastal areas of India are probably, also like many other parts of the world, going to be bearing quite a brunt of it. And, obviously, livelihoods of fishermen is also going to be, I think, impacted if it isn't already. Anjali, do you want to add more to how it's impacting livelihoods, and also like the whole, I mean, inequality of this whole, I mean, there's already inequality, and there is a concern worldwide that the inequality is just growing. Worldwide it's growing, and there, even though there's concern, there hasn't been much of action again, even on this in terms of policies. The US is trying to do a little bit towards that, but there's a lot of pushback as well. But maybe, like, if both of you can talk a little more about how sadly a lot of people who actually did not contribute to climate change, because as Anjali pointed out in the beginning, it's a lot to do with industrialization, fossil fuel, carbon emissions, and carbon emissions are mostly through, vehicles, but also air conditioning, and basically things that have been part of lifestyles of more people with more wealth. And you can see that inequality at a global level in terms of the West contributing more to this problem, really since the Industrial Revolution and all that. But so there you can see at a global level that inequality, but even within countries, it's the poor who will be facing more of the brunt of this, and maybe if both of you can talk a little, from a social justice issue, why this is an important topic to, for people
Yeah,
to think about, and youth in particular. Yeah.
sure. So yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned is very important, and we have to keep
Before
that.
you, I just
Yeah.
want to, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted the audience, everybody to know that we're open to questions. You can post questions in the chat box, and maybe after we've, gone through a little more of the discussion, we can open up for the speakers to start taking questions. So feel free to start posting your questions. Yeah, sorry,
Just
Anjali,
give
go
me
ahead.
1 second. My laptop is just going to die. 1 second.
Oh, okay, okay. Karthik, you want to talk a little about this in the meantime? Or should we just let Anjali? I mean, okay, she's coming back, but okay.
Yeah, sorry. So I think, yeah, one thing that you mentioned is extremely important that we have to keep in mind, which is that while climate change is something that's going to be impacting the entire world, it is not something that's going to be felt equally by everyone. It's not something that is going to, so if you think about it, even though it's going to impact the entire globe, some people may have the money or the resources to be able to escape it for longer. They'll have the resources to, for example, buy a fan or buy an AC and escape the effects of climate change for a while. Whereas many other people do not have that privilege. And so when we think about climate solutions also, it's important that, you think about this, someone who doesn't even know where they're going to get food tomorrow to eat for a meal. You can't expect their primary fight to be climate change at that moment.
Yeah.
It does rest upon those of us who have the privilege to kind of look beyond our own lives, look beyond our own circles and our own privilege, to think about how can we fix climate change, how can we fix a mess that is created largely by our lifestyles, by most of our lifestyles here. So it is very important to look at that. But delving more into like the livelihood aspect and like the social inequality aspect. So a couple of numbers for you all first, which is that firstly, according to the World Bank and quite a few other sources, it is stated that in a few years, so right now the number of people who don't have jobs is at 700 million people who are unemployed. And because of climate change, that is expected to increase to 1 billion. 1 billion. So we're increasing unemployment tremendously. Additionally, there it is, yeah, so that is definitely one huge aspect and one big concerning aspect. Additionally, it's going to impact our economy. So you can imagine that so many people being unemployed is going to be impacting our economy massively. Also with climate change, we're seeing more disasters. Like I mentioned earlier, you're seeing cyclones, you're seeing floods. And this is also going to increase the number of people who are displaced due to these kind of disasters. Where do people go if they're displaced? It creates more crowding in cities. And our cities already do not have the resources to be tackling this. They don't have the planning, they don't have the resources. So we're crowding cities even further. In terms of livelihoods, so you already started mentioning about fishing communities. So there are also other issues with that in terms of fishing communities. So obviously, as temperatures rise, one, you definitely have an increase in sea level, which causes a lot of coastal areas to be submerged. And that removes the fishing grounds for a lot of communities. Along with that, what happens is that with an increase in temperature, your sensitive ecosystems like coral reefs and a lot of fish, they actually die. Coral reefs, did you all know that coral reefs actually produce more oxygen than the forests on Earth? And the more coral reefs we lose, that's actually contributing to climate change even more. But coming back to livelihood, what that causes is that when you have fewer fish closer to the shore, fisher communities, fisher folk have to go further into the ocean to catch the same amount of fish. And the further you go into the ocean, the more difficult it is, and the less fish you're going to find as they die because of climate change. That results in huge trawlers and huge fishing boats being used to increase the fishing supply so that we can continue to get seafood in urban centers. And as we do more trawling and as we do more big fishing in deeper parts of the sea, we're destroying more of the ecosystem. So that's not only removing the livelihoods from people, but that's also causing more mechanization of fishing. So that's in terms of fishing communities. Then you have a huge impact on outdoor labor work. So for example, farming, which Karthik was talking about, or even construction work. In India, construction is a huge industry, and construction work will be heavily impacted. So for example, in the day, basically as temperatures rise in India, you all have experienced, especially during summer, how strong the heat is in the center of the day, right? Around like between 11 to 4 o'clock. It's extremely hot. And as the temperatures rise, it's just going to become even hotter and very, very difficult to work outside. So we're going to be losing about 80 million full-time jobs in the construction industry by 2030 in India. That's a huge number of people who will be unemployed. And the economic impact of this is going to be about 1.6 lakh crores with the number of jobs that are lost. That is a huge amount. That is a huge amount that we cannot possibly compensate for. And most of this will be in agriculture and construction. What's also going to happen is that as it becomes hotter and hotter and people cannot be working during that time, obviously productivity is going to go down, and this is not going to be okay with big corporates and capitalistic companies like construction companies and things. So they're going to replace human labor with technology, with AI, which is what's happening in many parts of the world already. What does that do? That further reduces the jobs. And so we see a further decrease in livelihood for many people, and they have no alternative source because our education system is such that many of them have either not gone to school, or the education that they've learned has not provided the skills to be able to work in any other place. So you kind of get left stranded, and then you see huge migration waves like we did at the start of the pandemic. So that is with outdoor farming work. Then, of course, you have a lot of traditional livelihoods, especially amongst Adivasi communities. These are in many of the forested and mountain regions of India. So you might know climate change is majorly caused by deforestation also. So while it's about emissions, it's also about cutting down trees, because fewer trees you have, the less basically carbon sinks you have, places where carbon can be absorbed and oxygen can be released. So as we increase deforestation, along with deforestation, you're also removing the primary livelihood for a lot of Adivasi communities, because they are dependent on these natural resources, and they have communities and they have ecosystems created there already. And when you displace them, a lot of the times you cut down such large forests, and it gets replaced with factories, and then people have to work in factories. So question is that really livelihood, or is that a job? There's a difference between livelihoods and jobs. You're removing livelihoods that have sustained people for years, and you're putting them into mechanized, really harmful health, in terms of health and in terms of like income. You're putting people into horrible jobs, and that is not livelihood. Additionally, what's happening is because of climate change, we're seeing a huge push towards renewable energies. And dams are considered renewable energy for some reason. Although dams also release a lot of methane, they are extremely destructive, both ecologically and in terms of emissions. And they displace a lot of people. So what we're seeing is with increase of climate change, countries are moving towards hydropower dams. And dams have been wreaking havoc in India for years now. What happens is that there are very poor assessments done on whether a dam should be or should not be made. Whole areas of forests are cleared, and with that, forest biodiversity and Adivasi communities are all displaced or removed from those areas. And these huge mega hydropower projects are set up. And this is just going to be increasing as this whole climate discourse is increasing. So we're talking about solutions for climate change, but we're not thinking about solutions which incorporate social justice or ecological justice. So that's very important to keep in mind. I had earlier mentioned also urbanization, right? So how with all of this loss of livelihood And let's say with like Karthik had mentioned, a decrease in agriculture, where are people going to go? They end up in the city, but we don't have the resources in the city. We have overcrowding in the city. We'll have an increase in slum areas. We have not enough sanitation, poor water, poor food, poor distribution systems, and our cities cannot take the burden. They cannot take the load. So that becomes an additional issue. Now, in terms of inequality, there's two very big parts in India, at least, which is gender and caste, that we have to address when we're talking about social justice in terms of ecological justice. Gender. First of all, women are in India, in most places, whenever we think of farmer, we think of a male farmer. Whenever we think of fisher folk, we think of a male fisher folk. When we think of a construction worker, we think of a male construction worker. But actually, more than 50% of India's workforce in all of these is actually women. It's not men. Women are actually the backbone of India's economy. And they take up all of the work of food, water, fuel, everything is done by women. And obviously, as these resources reduce, the impact on women is very clear. For example, water. The more droughts we have, the further women will have to walk to actually collect water. And this is not just, in some places, this happens everywhere across India. As a lot of men, usually men are the ones who migrate to cities, or it'll be men with their families. So as more men migrate to cities, when agriculture stops, when agriculture is not that good back home, all of the responsibility will also fall onto women. So of course, all of the earlier livelihood issues, which I mentioned, which are going to be primarily impacting women even more, along with that, they'll have additional burdens caused by climate change. Purely because they have to not only earn money, but they have to also take care of their family. They have to also provide food and provide water and deal with issues of domestic violence, of taboos, of so many things, of safety. And so all of this combined, gender becomes a very, very crucial aspect that we have to address or have to think about when we think about social justice connected to climate justice. The other aspect, which I think often gets left out when we talk about ecological justice or climate justice, is caste. And of course, I myself, I have to acknowledge my privilege here when I'm talking about this, that I'm talking about caste and justice, but I'm still working on this in myself and still learning towards it. And I would urge everyone to do that. But so if there's a lot of amazing work by many campaigns, human rights, human Dalit right campaigns and organizations, which you should definitely read up on. But essentially a lot of the work that Dalit communities and so to say lower caste communities depend on is agriculture and livestock work, along with a lot of construction work and outdoor work. And we already mentioned how this is going to be impacted by climate. But additionally, what happens with especially the Dalit communities is that they're already considered untouchable, and they are discriminated and excluded from many parts of society. So they have even fewer resources to be able to deal with not having a livelihood anymore, or to deal with a disaster that occurs. So cyclones and things like that. Communities like Dalit communities who are already vulnerable because they are excluded from society may find it even more difficult to be able to deal with the realities of losing a job or being impacted by a disaster. So these kind of social and economic vulnerabilities make it even more difficult for them. Additionally, our policies, like our national disaster policies and our policies otherwise in India, they don't recognize basically caste inequality in terms of the impact of caste inequality in disaster management. And they also don't recognize Dalit communities as a marginalized community. They also don't recognize Dalit communities' contribution towards conservation, biodiversity conservation, or whether it is in the sector of waste collection or any of these kind of things. The role of Dalit communities, they are not considered a marginalized community, and that means that protection or work towards supporting and basically giving support and reducing this kind of discrimination is very little. And then it falls up to the communities themselves to work with it, because in most upper caste communities, we like to believe that caste no longer exists in India. And so we like to turn a blind eye to the fact that caste is still very much an issue, and climate impact will definitely have an impact on Dalit communities and lower caste communities. But we like to pretend that caste doesn't exist. And so therefore we are not able to come up with solutions which address caste inequality and gender inequality. So sorry, I know that was a lot that I covered. I'm sure there might be questions later, but it's extremely important that when we look at like climate justice, we think about it as being this thing where, okay, we just have to switch to metal straws and metal spoons and plates, and we have to stop buying plastic, and climate change will be solved. But that's literally just not even the tip of the iceberg. That's like a little crumb of the iceberg. There is so much more that we have to unpack below that, which is one, what are the actual causes of climate change? But on top of that, it's going to impact so many lives and livelihoods, our health, it's going to impact our economy. And it's very, very much driven by things like gender and caste. So yeah, I'm going to hand it back to you now.
Yeah,
and
I think
Karthik would like to add anything. Then
yeah, definitely. But I have to say, Anjali, this is like I find it really quite amazing, remarkable how you kind of brought it all together. And it's so true that's why like local action is so important. And even country wise, like issues that you brought up in this just now, about caste, about gender, okay, maybe common to many other countries as well, but caste in particular, it's not something you think about when you think about climate change. And so I think it's really great that you have touched upon so many things in terms of inequality and social justice. But Karthik, is there anything you want to add to this? I know it was a lot that Anjali talked about, but if there's anything you want to add. And also I wanted to say, since you yourself are into agriculture, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like what drove you to that. And I know when we were chatting, you mentioned some of the varieties of rice that no longer exist or whatever, but like at a personal level, because of what you're involved with, how do you kind of connect that to partly why you went into agriculture? Maybe you can talk a little about that as well. Yeah.
So I would like to add some points to what Anjali said. Like also someone mentioned that moving away from air conditioning is a solution, but we need to keep in mind that our current electricity, 51% of our current electricity comes from coal, as far as India is concerned. So this coal is the highest emitter. This coal is emitting carbon dioxide, and it is causing the climate change. So coal is one of the major contributors. So we need to switch up the modes of electricity which we produced, rather than solutions that are working at the individual level. And also we need to consider another important gas that causes climate change. So one is carbon dioxide. I think many people knew carbon dioxide is creating climate change. Another thing is that nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is also one of the gases that causes climate change. So nitrous oxide is actually 298 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. That is, one molecule of nitrous oxide emitted into the environment is equal to 298 molecules of carbon dioxide that is emitted into atmosphere. So we need to also keep in mind where this nitrous oxide comes from. So one important source of this nitrous oxide is stubble burning, which many people might have known. This stubble burning also causes nitrous oxide to be emitted into the environment, which in turn causes the climate change. So, but this stubble burning is like the percentage which it contributes to the environment is very, very much low. Like only 10% of nitrous oxide is emitted from stubble burning. Remaining 70% of nitrous oxide comes from the fertilizer usage. So right now our agriculture has become nitrogen fertilizer, that is chemical fertilizer intensive. When we put these kinds of chemical fertilizers into the soil, so as this chemical fertilizers improve the yield, it goes into the soil and reacts with the microbe and emits nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. So this nitrous oxide is creating too much damage to the environment, and it is also causing an ecological damage at the soil level. So when you go into the organic farming, you have the probability, or you have the chance to reduce this nitrogen fertilizer. Actually, I am not using any nitrogen fertilizer, but right now more than 90% of Indian farmers are using nitrogen fertilizer, which is causing climate change. So this also needs to be kept in mind before any climate change thing is happening. Also like the reason behind I entered the organic farming is that today's food is like more contaminated, to be frank. Like more than 90% of farmers in India use glyphosate. Glyphosate is only one such herbicide. We use ketosine, we use biserbic sodium, etc and etc. There are many kind of pesticide and weedicide that are used in agriculture. So these pesticides and weedicides are proven to be carcinogen. So these the food that we eat contains carcinogen. This is something to be concerned. Carcinogen in our food is something to be concerned. So when you enter into organic farming, these kinds of things will be taken away from the whole scenario. So also like what I'm doing is that I'm doing organic farming with the native seeds. Let me say an example with just one variety. So as far as rice is concerned, rice is a staple food of I think more than 90% of Indians. So rice everyone knew. But before 1960s, there were 2 lakh varieties of rice seeds in India. 2 lakh varieties. Every variety has unique taste, unique aroma, unique medicinal values, unique that could grow in salt water, that could be drought. Any kind of varieties are there. But in this past 60 years, we have lost more than 1,98,000 of rice seeds, which is we lost 98% of seed diversity in just 60 years. This is a point to be concerned. So these kinds of this 2 lakh varieties has been given by our ancestors from maybe 2000 years or 3000 years before. They are giving it to the next generation, but we have literally destroyed 98% of seed diversity in just 60 years. So this is a point of concern. So when you go into this kinds of indigenous varieties of seeds in agriculture, it doesn't need pesticides basically. So if it doesn't need the pesticide, you don't need to put a poison into the food that we are eating. And also this poison basically what to say, basically affects the environment in a very bad way. For example, let me say an example. For example, if due to the climate change, a particular insect or a particular fruit may be going to may not be flowering. If the particular plant in the forest is not what to say, is not coming to the age at right point, a particular species may go out of food. So that will create an irreversible damage in the ecosystem of the forest, which will be directly affecting the humanity. So like this is the reason. Like this 2 lakh variety, when coming back to the point of rice, this 2 lakh varieties has become extreme. Not only rice, each and every food that we eat has a political side of it, has a toxic side of it. We need to be concerned about. So that it also has a climate change point of view. We need to be very conscious of. I think yeah, GM food is also coming into existence, which means genetically modified crops. So basically, it is what to say. It is a very deep topic, but when GM comes into the food, it is literally we are eating the poison. So right now, government has also passed a draft for allowing this GM foods to be into Indian market, and we are also working towards that for not allowing that. But right now, we need to be very concerned about the food we eat. The impact it creates on the environment, impact it creates on the climate, the impacts it creates on the humanity. So food is what all connects everything. So this is all about a policy failure that we are facing, and we need to be conscious about it to face the future, so as everything goes okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Karthik. Would love to know more about, or maybe debate a little more about farming, but we'll need a complete full webinar on that. Maybe at a later point we can do that. But before we open up to, for Anjali, Karthik to take questions, and I'm just looking at the watch, and we have 7 minutes, and maybe we can extend if it's okay with everybody to, go a little, maybe 10 minutes if we need to. But before we open up for questions, I know both of you touched upon policies a little bit, But maybe Anjali, if you could talk a little more about policies, and also maybe just touch upon, given, in the interest of time, touch upon the IPCC report, the latest. Uh, from what I remember, yes, South Asia, one thing that strikes is South Asia is amongst the, places, areas of the world that is expected to be very high on the list of, countries that are going to be severely impacted. And I know, Anjali, you touched upon a lot of that, but there was a lot more in the IPCC report. And maybe like I said, you can touch upon that, but to conclude, our discussion, talk a little more about policies, and then we'll open up for questions.
Sure. I'm not going to spend much time on the IPCC because basically it's just a bunch of numbers and you can go and read it. It's not a very difficult read. But essentially it's talking about what the impact of climate change would be in terms of, one thing that the IPCC report states is that it's already quite late to be able to reverse climate change, and that what our goals need to be, that we need to be, looking at 2030, not 2070. Yeah. So all of these are, especially extremely important, and these are mentioned in the IPCC report. So please do take a look at it. But I think I wanted to specifically talk about policies, especially in terms of India. So what are we doing to combat climate change? And it's a little troubling. So we've spoken about the impact of climate change on India, and it's not just an environmental issue that elite privileged young people in English will talk about. That's not what climate change is. Obviously, it's impacting so much more than that. So obviously, that should mean that we're doing an incredible amount at a national and a state level to combat it, right? Unfortunately not. And instead, we kind of seem to be going in the opposite direction, where recently, so now there are recently, just in the past 1 to 2 years, we've seen more than 5 to 6 dilutions of environmental acts in India. So the environmental impact assessment happened 2 years ago in 2020, when it's been severely diluted to make it much easier for businesses, damaging businesses, to start and clear land and not have any public consultation and many other issues like that. So that's still a draft. Along with that, has been proposed a serious dilution to the Forest Conservation Act to make it a lot easier to explore within the forest, to generally conduct business and mining and exploration in forest areas, and to reduce the protection. There's also impact. So they're also planning to amend the Biodiversity Act and the Wildlife Conservation Act. So these are again 2 more. And recently they also amended the Coastal Zone Regulation Acts. Coastal Regulation Zone Act. And basically through this, what's also going to happen is that the area that counts as coastal zones itself will be reduced, but it's going to have a huge impact on our coasts and general fishing communities also. And these are just 5, that have happened in the past 1 to 2 years, but there have been many, these are the national policies. Each state has also been diluting its environmental policies. And this is at a time when we should actually be focusing on our climate and environmental policies and making them stronger than ever, especially climate resilience policies. All states are supposed to have a climate change impact policy to basically address and to build capacity to deal with climate change. Each state is supposed to have this. There are about 8 to 9 states in India that actually have a working version of this policy. And they are extremely outdated, barely 30 to 40 pages for each state. Imagine an entire state just having a 30 to 40 page policy document on how to address climate change. And these policies usually take a huge backseat to water and electricity and growth and business policies that the state has besides the climate change policy. So the climate change policy is just there for namesake, and it's not being developed, it's not being improved, it's not taking in consideration local communities and what they want in the policy. It's not doing any of these things, and most states don't even have a working version of it. So this is extremely problematic because that means we don't even have a working plan of how to address climate change if we are not able to stop it. We have no way of making sure that people who are most vulnerable are able to deal with it, cope with the impacts. And yeah, we have no plans to, for example, stop flooding, stop deal with all of these issues. So in terms of policies, we are really going in the opposite direction, in my opinion, right now. And even like the GM foods one that Karthik mentioned, it's another one. Recently, the farm laws also that happened. Farm laws also going to have a huge climate impact. So all of these policies are just going in the opposite direction at the moment in terms of what we actually need to be addressing climate change in India. Karthik, would you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, only one point. Recently, last year, our Honorable Prime Minister has allowed coal mining to happen in many parts of India, and they have allowed coal extraction to be happening in 10 places. And many of these blocks are inside the highly eco-sensitive area. I will give an example about only one coal block, and remaining 9 thing you could imagine. One thing is situated in Hastio, which is a reserved forest, and if this coal blocks comes into existence, it will be deforesting 2 lakh forest trees that are there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they have given a green signal, current regime, and they are going with this deforestation plan and coal extraction plan, which will also impact the climate and the forest. Yeah.
Yeah. My God, we could have a full topic, I think, on policies, global as well. I know there have been some comments, really interesting comments. We don't have the time to go through all of them, but I hope Karthik and Anjali, you could at least like browse through them maybe. And Shoaib, if there are some questions, you can point them out. I'm kind of like having a bit of a challenge going through the
Would
chat
you like to
session.
just ask people to raise their hands or just speak
Yeah,
out their questions
actually,
if they
why
have
not?
them?
Yeah. That might be easier. Yeah, for questions, do raise your hands. And I looked at some of the comments, and absolutely, yeah, there was a comment about this being a global issue, and individual countries can't do much. That's so true. And yes, global, leaders do get together, and yet we are nowhere close to thinking of global solutions and for countries to come together. Even within South Asia, we are not like thinking of any solutions together at all, even though uh, uh, you know solutions are really probably the only way that we have common rivers, common Himalaya, I mean, a lot of things. But yeah, let's see if there are any questions, and anybody who wants to ask a question, do raise your hands and or type your question, and Anjali and Karthik are there to answer. And in terms of the time check, we usually have the webinars for about an hour, and we're just over an hour. And so we can, if there are questions, we can, I guess, extend by maybe 10 minutes, just to respect everybody's time. And of course, if we don't, then we can kind of wrap up. But I do hope some people do ask questions, and let's see. Any questions? Anybody? No. Shoaib, have you seen any through the chat? If there are any
No,
questions?
there isn't any question, but I do have one question to especially
Yeah.
Anjali. So, Anjali, you discuss basically very honestly, you discuss how this is going to affect, basically the Dalits and the lower caste people, as seen as these. So, there's another point which I have seen, and I have never seen any climate activists discuss that most of the people they have this very coming from very upper class and upper caste, then still the climate activism is very hegemonized by the upper caste. People from the marginalized community, be it Muslims, Dalit, Adivasis, or any other marginalized communities, they are not represented in that discussion at all. Whether they are heading the organization, so you as a climate activist and especially also as a person who is heading an organization, how do you plan to or how do you see to decentralize this climate activism in India, which is very centralized to basically the metropolitan cities. If you go to my village and you will talk to even to my parents, and you will say there's something, or I will go to talk to them, there's something called climate change. They are saying like we are afraid of tomorrow. Maybe because of my identity, I can be killed tomorrow, and you're talking to me about climate change. So how do you see to plan these and building a movement against this?
That's a really interesting question. Very great question. I want to just start by first saying we upper caste, upper class folks love to pretend that we started the climate change movement. We didn't start the climate change movement.
Exactly.
We appropriated the climate change movement in many ways. And the climate change movement, or the climate change to stop environmental degradation and climate change, this movement has been going on for decades already by farming communities, by fishing communities, Adivasi communities, and Dalit communities. Just because there wasn't so much literature on it does not mean that it was not happening. And what we conveniently did was we silenced those voices and we took on the narrative, and we started, we basically co-opted the narrative. And now we say that we need to go and educate those who are from marginalized communities on what climate change is and how we can stop and how we can solve it, which is just, it's ridiculous because these communities know what it is way better than what I would know sitting here. That is one to begin with. So when we talk about decentralizing the movement is already decentralized. We, people who are middle upper class or like upper caste, we need to get off our thrones and we need to actually go down and understand that all of this is already happening, and we have to use our resources and privilege to support movements that are already there, that already exist and have been working for a long time. We have to just support and help. We don't have to lead or we don't have to co-opt the space and the voice. And I think when we recognize that, automatically the way you start working shifts. So you try to, for example, even though like Karthik and I are we have this organization, Yugma Network. One of our goals is to see if we can bring in democracy at an organizational level within the organization. And one of our goals is to address diversity even within the organization. It should be a diverse group of young people. Youth doesn't just mean young people who are entrepreneurs from cities. Youth is a very diverse group in India, and we need to recognize that diversity within the young population as well. And so, of course, it's always a work in progress, and we will in no way say that Yugma Network is there at all. But this is very much on our radar, and we're trying to work towards it. And I think this is coming more and more on the radar of many environmental young environmental organizations in India, especially in the past year and a half. I think the pandemic has made all of us move away from what we call white environmentalism to an environmentalism that's grounded in social justice. And I think as soon as you recognize social justice, your environmentalism automatically becomes more inclusive and supportive and all of those things. But I think also you had another part of your question. One second, I just blanked out on it. You mentioned, so the other part of it was like, for example, if you're being persecuted right now, how do you expect someone to be addressing climate change at that time? I think we have to recognize that one organization or one person cannot be solving all of the issues that a diverse country like India has. It's just not possible. For example, Yugma Network cannot deal with religious persecutions at the same time as climate change and farming and all of these various different aspects. There's too many issues to deal with. But that's why you have more than 1,000 organizations in a country like India, more than 10,000, I would say even. Every single city has hundreds of organizations working on the same issue, for example. And I think what we need to realize is that social justice and environmental justice are not two separate issues. We have to, as organizations, work more closely together to see how we can, how we can address some issues. So, for example, when you spoke about persecution of Muslim communities, there are many organizations who are working on that as an issue. How do we now tie that to environmental justice and climate resilience is a conversation that needs to be had and started between organizations and between communities to be able to facilitate some solutions for that. And so that also the burden is not, all of this burden should not be placed on communities who are already undergoing persecution and who are vulnerable, right? A lot of the burden should be taken on by people who have the privilege and who are sitting comfortably in their homes to be doing some thinking and working and groundwork also. So that's what I would say to your answer. Of course, there are many other perspectives, and I'm sure I've left out a lot as well. But this is just an initial idea on how we could go about addressing this.
No,
And
thanks a
actually,
lot for using this.
yeah, that was a great question, and I'm glad we discussed it. And actually, I guess it's a good point to remind everybody that the second webinar that we plan to have, and of course we'll be, sharing information on it, is going to be on the history of activism around it, which really was, more in non-urban areas, and India has a very, very long history, and that's what, like, the second webinar is going to kind of talk more about, because it is those communities who actually also know better how to kind of tackle climate change, because they have, like, generations of knowledge. Many of them, it's getting lost, but nevertheless they do, and they actually, it's important for them to be part of the conversation. As Anjali put, it's been kind of co-opted, but definitely, do join that one when we announce it. And also, I want to mention that one of the objective, as I said in the beginning, is for at the end of this series to see what local actions can be done, how FFPC can get involved, whether it's, the marginalized communities, whether it's the minorities, or whether it's really local to a region like, say, Delhi, what can be done. So that's what third one is going to be more about, in terms of solutions and how to get involved, etc. Going back to, like, we really, again, we're 10 minutes beyond, but some of the questions were, I think they require a very, like, the answers, I don't think you can answer them in one or two sentences. How can we stop deforestation? For example, I don't know if either of you want to comment on that, or that was one question. And how do you educate children about climate change? If any of you want to kind of, comment on these two, without, going too much into it, so that we can kind of end for today. Anyone wants to address these two? Children, how to talk to children about it, and deforestation, like, it's up to you, both of you, if you want to, like, comment on these two questions.
Karthik, would you like to comment on the education or
Okay.
No, I can tell something about deforestation. So even like the point of deforestation doesn't come in mainstream media. So it is very pathetic about that. So all our environmental groups and colleagues are collectively doing this on our social media. Anjali has shared our social media link so that we are constantly looking out for this content and creating awareness about this deforestation to the people. So Anjali, if you could take this DLRC education part,
Sure,
that would
sure.
be good.
So, I mean, we have two programs in Yugma network itself. One is working with DLRC school in Pune, where we're working on environmental literacy. And other than that, we also have a few people in the organization who who are working in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh area to address a more environmentally just curriculum. So they're working and building that with like looking at CBSE curriculum and revising it. But I think in general, if we talk about what needs to be done, and I put this in my answer also, but we need way more resources and money and everything, time, dedication dedicated to our education sector. Because if you look at the salary of a teacher, it's minute. And I can say this because both my parents are teachers and they both run a school in Pune, and so I like learned a lot through their work about this. But it's minute, like the salary that teachers get in India. It's minute the amount of money and resources that are allocated to teaching, and our syllabus and curriculum itself at a national and state level needs to be changed so that it's a lot more environmentally and social child and eco-centric, and it needs to be basically worked on with local environmental organizations and with local communities. It needs to be made more contextual. It has to include climate change. Many of these things are required. It's a very topic for another time, actually, but in brief, I think there's so many things that we need to do, and there's many movements in India and globally which are working actually on this. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think with that, let's just kind of wrap this up. I really want to thank both of you, Karthik, Anjali, for I think a really very, very interesting conversation and a lot of things that you've covered in just an hour. So I greatly appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that I do want to mention it was a challenge to get people for this webinar because so many people are sick that others we reached out to, the response we kept getting was I'm down with COVID. And so I know Karthik, you in particular, joined at the very last minute, and I appreciate that as well, and appreciate all of you joining. And like I said, we will be hosting 2 more. And I mean, it's all flexible. We could have more, another series, maybe, because this is such a huge topic. And I would actually love to have people from, the farming community, like farmers, people from some of the tribal areas into some of these conversations, and we'll think about how we can do that at a later time. Do check out our website ffecindia.org, and we are on social media, and so that you kind of know what we're doing, other areas that we're involved in, and continuing our webinar series. And I also want to let everyone know that we have recorded this one, and it will be available on Facebook, on social media, FFECs, and of course I'll share with Anjali and Karthik, and anybody who wants to kind of share that, feel free to do that as well. So thanks everyone, and looking forward to seeing at least some of you in our next webinar. Bye. Good
Thank you
night.
so much for inviting us, and it was great interacting with all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hoping to work soon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye.
definitely. Bye, everyone.